look at problem, guys, glasses off. We're going to look at problem number 20. Problem number 20 says if there is a line and a point not on the line, then there is exactly one line through the point that intersects the given line. Well, there's infinitely many lines, because if we're given a line and a point not on the line, well, I can draw an infinite number of lines that go through that point and cross it. So that's not true. But what we can say is if there is a line and a point not on the line, then there is exactly one line through that point that is perpendicular. Perpendicular to the given line. Then there's actually one line through that given point that is perpendicular. If there's a line and a point not on the line, then there's exactly one line through that point that is perpendicular to the given line. So that's what we need to correct. Guys, let's Chromebooks, everything shut, headphones out. And that's all we would need to do to make the correction for number 20. Because their statement is wrong, and this is what we need to do to correct it. And then number 8, name a pair of perpendicular lines. Well, so we can say two lines that are perpendicular, we're looking for a right angle, so P, what is it, Q or O? O, PO is going to be perpendicular to P, what was it? PQ, PQ, and PN. And these two would be perpendicular because at their intersection there is a right angle. So that would be it for those two. Any other questions on this here? Okay. Now what we're looking at today is corresponding angles, our alternate interior, our alternate exterior, and consecutive interior angles, given that the two lines are parallel. Given that our two lines are parallel and cut by a transversal. Now, if the two lines are parallel and cut by a transversal, then the pair of consecutive interior or corresponding angles, so we're starting out with corresponding, are congruent. If two lines are cut by a transversal, two parallel lines, then the pair of corresponding angles are congruent. So for us here, our corresponding our corresponding angles would be congruent. So angle 1 for this figure here would be congruent to angle 5. Angle 2 would be congruent to angle 6. Guys. Angle 3 in our diagram would be congruent to angle 7. And lastly, angle 4 would be congruent to angle 8 because those four angles are corresponding. They match up to each other. So because the two lines are parallel and cut by transversal, these would be congruent. Yeah, corresponding angles, when we have two parallel lines, are going to be congruent. Now the alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of alternate interior angles are congruent. So for us here, we can say that 5 and 4 are going to be congruent. We can also say that what? Are going to be congruent. So we can say that 3 and 6. And 5 and 4, those alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. So corresponding angles are congruent if we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. Corresponding and alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. Now, the alternate exterior angle theorem, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pair of alternate interior angles are congruent. So looking at this here, that means that angle 1 and 8 would be congruent. Angle 1 would be congruent to angle 8. We'd also say that angle 2 and 7 would be congruent because they're the other set of alternate exterior angles. So they're going to be congruent. Yes? And the last one is that the consecutive interior angle theorem, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pair of consecutive interior angles are they congruent? Supplementary. They're going to add up to be 180. Well, if we look at this here, well, 1 and 4 would be congruent, yes? Why would we be able to say that? Because they starts with a V. From the last chapter? Vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent, which means 5 and 8 would be congruent. 7 and 6 would be congruent. 2 and 3 would be congruent, yes? But wait a minute, how many different angle measures do I have in this figure? 2, yes? Because 1 and 4 are congruent, 1 and 5, 1 and 8, because of corresponding alternate exterior, alternate interior, and vertical angles. All of those are going to be the same value. 2 and 3, 2 and 6, 2 and 7, 6 and 7, all the others are going to be congruent because of our vertical angles, alternate interior, alternate exterior, and corresponding. So really, out of these 8 angles, we only have 2 different values, yes? Well, what do angles 1 and 2 do? They make a straight line, yes? So they add together to be what? 180. Well, that means 2 and 4 add together to be 180, yes? Or really any of them, if they're not congruent, they add together to be 180. Because if we have 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal, either the measures are going to be the same or they're going to add together to be 180. So let's look at an example of this here. So we're given 2 parallel lines that are cut by a transversal. And we're told that the measure of angle 1 is 120. We want to find the rest. So we're told that the measure of angle 1 is 120. What's another angle that we can find its measure of?
5, yeah.
Because what would 5 be?
5 would be 120.
And we know that because 1 and 5 are?
Congruent.
Or what kind of angles? Corresponding. They're in the same location, yes? So they're corresponding angles. So we can say angle 5 is 120.
So if they're 120, the other would have to be 60.
Okay. So angle 1 that's already given to us 120 and angle 2 make a straight line, yes? So they would add together to be 180 degrees. So to be able to find angle 2, we can take 180 and subtract 120 from it. Well, 180 minus 120 is?
60.
So the measure of angle 2 is?
6.
Well, 2 and 3 are vertical angles, yes?
Yes.
So angle 3 has to be? Well, 3 and 7 are corresponding angles, yes?
Yeah.
So 7 is? And it means angle 6 is also going to be 60. So really we can use corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior to fill in the 120s. Well, again, any two of those angles make a straight line, so they should add together to be 180. We find one of the other sets, fill in the rest. Questions on this here? We feel good with this here? Yes, sir.
I didn't get that.
Yes, sir.
On the other ones, when you're going from like
120?
like you said, you're going from like 1 to like 8 or something, or like I don't know.
Are we good with this here, guys?
Yes, sir.
So let's look at this here.
740, 75, 745.
Okay. So
This is the same thing.
No, it's 75.
Or that's 7, the number is 75.
all right, guys. So we're finding the measure of angle 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you can talk it through if you want.
Number 1's 105. Number 2 is 75. Number 4 is 105.
Okay, we're going to need more than that. So we know that the one angle is 75 degrees, yes? What would be a corresponding angle with it? 7. So since we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, it means the measure of angle 7 is 75 degrees because they're congruent, yes? What angle would be an alternate interior angle to our given 75? 6, because 75 and angle 6 are alternate interior angles, so it would be 75 as well. Alternate interior, they are between the two lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. So they're congruent. So we have that this is 75 degrees, 7 is 75 degrees, and angle 2 would, because it is a vertical angle with our given 75, or the fact that 2 and 7 are alternate exterior angles, so they would be the same.
We don't have to name the steps.
No, I'm not going to make you name it. Now, 1, 4, 5, and 8 are going to be congruent. 1 and 8 are alternate exterior angles. 4 and 5 are alternate interior angles. So those would match up, yes?
I tell you, I got 105.
Okay.
Subtract 75 from 180. Comes out to be 105.
Right, we can subtract 75 from 180 because if we pick any of these two, well, 75 and angle 1 make a straight line, so they'll add together to be 180. We could also have said 75 and angle 5 are consecutive interior angles. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary, so they should add together to be 180. So it means the measure of angle 5 is 105, which means the measure of angle 4 is measure of angle 2, 5, angle 1 is, and angle 8 is 105. And that's it. Questions on this here? So we're told that the measure of angle 1 is 105. What's the measure of angle 4? Because they are vertical What about the measure of angle 5? Because no, because 1 and 5 are corresponding. 4 and 5 are alternate interior angles, but 1 and 5 are corresponding. How about angle 1 and angle 8?
105.
They're alternate exterior angles, so it means the measure of angle 8 is 105. We could also say that 5 and 8 are vertical angles, or 4 and 8 are corresponding, but they're all going to give us the same measure. Questions on this here?
Oh, we don't have to tell what the other ones are?
That's the only ones it asked for.
Okay.
The others were asking for all of them.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
Find the value of x. Is 115 and our x plus 5, are they corresponding angles? Because they're on opposite sides, so they're not going to be corresponding. Now, they are alternate. One's on one side of the transversal and the other. So we either have alternate exterior or alternate interior. It's neither, right? Because alternate exterior, they'd have to both be outside. Alternate interior means they both would have to be inside. So is there any way that these would be congruent? Well, if they're not congruent, it means they have to do what? Add together to be 180. Because if we look at this here, 115 and this angle here would be congruent. Those are corresponding, yes? Well, now the 115 and the x plus 5 make a straight. So they add together to be 180. So if I want to find it, well, we can say x plus 5 plus 115 is equal to 180. That's fine, as long as you get the right answer. Because we can add these two together. 115 plus 5 is? Mm-hmm. Yep. Subtract 120 from both sides. And we get x is equal to? And that's it. Questions on this here? Do these two. So we have our next one here. So 2x and 120. So they are on opposite sides of the transversal, yes? So we're stuck with alternate exterior, alternate interior. Are they alternate exterior or alternate interior? Neither, because alternate interior, they both have to be between the lines, the parallel lines. Well, they're not. Alternate exterior means they'd both have to be outside the parallel lines. Well, they're not. And they're not corresponding because they're not in the same location. So they're not going to be congruent. But I do know that 2x, these two x's here are corresponding, so they would be congruent. And it shows me that these two here will make a straight line. So it means that these two angles should add together to be 180. Any questions on how we set this up? So what can we do next? We can subtract 120 from both sides. Divide both sides by 2 to get x by itself. Okay, so x is equal to? And that's it. That's all we have to do for this here.
Is it good that I know this?
Any questions on this here? Any questions on any of this here?
Not ready. Well, you should leave it on X, not throw it to like A or B. I'll know it. X plus X equals
All right, guys, let's look at this one here. Is 136 and 7x plus 9, are they congruent? Because they're corresponding alternate exterior, alternate interior? No. The closest thing we could say to these is that they are consecutive exterior angles. They're on the same side. But that's really just telling me that these two angles do what?
It's 6.5.
They're going to add together to be 180. Because if they are not corresponding alternate exterior, alternate interior angles, then most likely they're going to add together to be 180. Because really, if we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, the angles are either going to be congruent or add together to be 180. Since these two are not congruent, they add together to be 180. So we can combine our like terms, 9 and 136. Well, 9 plus 136 is
145.
145. Okay. What do we do next? Well, I would subtract first, because we want to subtract first to get x by itself, or 7x by itself, because 145 minus 145 is 0. And 180 minus 145 is 35. And lastly, we divide both sides by, guys, we divide both sides by 7, telling us x is equal to 5. Questions on this here? Questions on this here? Let's look at this last one here. Yes. Okay. All right, guys. Let's look at this one here. These two angles are going to be supplementary. They add together to be 180, yes? 6y minus 3 and 129. These are alternate exterior, yes? So they're both on the outside and on opposite sides of the transversal, so it means that they are congruent. So since they're congruent, what we can do is set 6y minus 3 equals to 129. We can set them equal to each other because they are congruent. Alternate exterior angles. And all we guys, now we just need to solve for the value of y. So what's the first thing we can do? We would add 3, because since y is already on one side, we're going to move everything else away from it. So these will cancel, telling me 6y is equal to 132. And now what do we do? Divide both sides by 6. Y is equal to and that's it. Any questions on this here? Do we feel good with this here? Yes? All right. All right. Because the rest of this here isn't any different. Because that is it for today. So your assignment is on page 123, problems. Yes, write this down first.